Pep Guardiola made some key tactical changes for Manchester City when they came in and dominated Manchester United in the Manchester Derby today. This is how Pep changed Manchester City. Initially, we saw a little bit different of a look for Manchester City when they were in possession. When City were building up, typically we would see the fullbacks of Cancelo and Walker a little bit more inverted to create a three-man midfield. However, today, we typically saw Manchester City building up from deep because United wanted to keep a higher line and press a little bit higher like Ten Hag likes to do. We saw a traditional back four for Manchester City with Walker and Cancelo staying high and near the touchlines. And we could see that from Manchester City's other games this season, they're typically a little bit more inverted, but this was deliberate from Pep because the wider fullbacks allowed for Manchester City to build out from the back and play through Manchester United's press extremely easily. Manchester United came out and defended in their typical 4-2-3-1 that Ten Hag likes to use and likes to press high with. However, with Pep moving Walker and Cancelo more into the typical out-wide fullback positions, it left a lot of space open in the midfield and it really stretched the Manchester United press, and this move by Pep made it really hard for Manchester United's press to be effective at any time throughout the game. The first reason was it left a lot of space centrally for the Manchester City players to drop in and receive the ball and then turn and move through space. We can see how when Walker receives the ball, he's more by the touchline and he's really stretching out the Manchester United press, and with all the Manchester City players dropping in to help receive and help move the ball forward, it was really hard for Manchester United to get a grip on their press and cause City any real forms of problems throughout the game. Another major aspect that City could abuse by having the wide fullbacks is having Akanji and Ake move the ball forward themselves. Because they have two great center backs who are also really good on the ball, Ake and Akanji could move forward and they could take on space relatively unmarked, where they could move the ball forward and progress it forward through the Manchester United press because they were so focused on the ball going to those fullbacks and going forward to Manchester City's midfielders and forwards. It's also just the individual brilliance of Manchester City's players that allow them to beat this press, as we saw balls switched from sideline to sideline throughout the game just to throw off the Manchester United press and make them really disorganized in defense. Again, we saw Ake and Akanji kind of take this free space all throughout the game, and Manchester United and Ten Hag didn't really do anything to stop them. They were really more focused on guarding Manchester City's midfielders and their fullbacks from progressing forward. And then we saw Akanji move into the midfield and even almost as a forward during Manchester City's first goal in their build-up, and him moving into that free space left him completely unmarked, and it was this movement that led to Manchester City's first goal of the game. Another aspect of Manchester City's build-up is Ederson. Ederson is extremely good on the ball, and he can ping passes just like any great midfielder can. So when Manchester United did look to press, Manchester City could easily go back to Ederson and he could ping balls over their press, and this gave them tons of problems, especially when he could ping it over their first line of press to any Manchester City midfielders, but especially to the Manchester City fullbacks that were high and hugging the touchline. Another interesting part about Manchester City's game plan today was the freedom that Pep Guardiola gave to his midfielders and forwards. We often saw Kevin De Bruyne or Bernardo Silva switching sides or even overloading one side of the field. You can see Kevin De Bruyne has moved into the left side of Manchester City's attack. He's moved over from the right side, which kind of creates an overload with him, Silva, Grealish, and Cancelo all on the left side. This really gave Manchester United's defense problems, and we saw Eriksen and McTominay, and it looked like that Ten Hag had tasked McTominay and Eriksen with following Kevin De Bruyne and Silva wherever they went in the midfield, and when they did make these runs into the other side of the midfield, it really caused them problems with their press, and Manchester City were usually easily able to play out and create overloads on the outside of the pitch. We especially saw this on Manchester City's left side early in the game, as Grealish had one of his best games ever as a Manchester City player, and that's because Bernardo Silva, Gundogan, and Cancelo were easily able to overload the left side, give Grealish a one-on-one with Dalot, or a two-on-one against Dalot, and that really gave Manchester United's left side problems. It led to an early yellow card for Dalot, and Grealish was just terrorizing the left side all throughout the game. Again, City were looking to find these overloads on both sides of the pitch. We saw Kevin De Bruyne move back from the left side to the right side, and we also saw Silva drift over to the right side. This played a major part in Foden's first goal of the game. Foden was typically playing from the right wing position, and he was staying far and high up on the right side. But for the first goal, after some passes on the top of the box, Foden drifts over into the left half space, and Eriksen and Varane aren't anticipating Foden being there, and they have a little miscommunication, and that's where Foden finds the free space and he's able to put a nice finish into the net. We also saw Bernardo often dropping into the defense or deep into midfield with Gundogan to create a two-man pivot, and this really helped City play through Manchester United's press. Overall, I think Pep Guardiola came in with a perfect game plan, knowing that Ten Hag would try and come in and play his game with his high press. For me, I think Ten Hag lost this with his team selection and how he wanted to play. If he really wanted to get a result against Manchester City, he should have chosen a more defensive player approach with Casemiro in the midfield with McTominay, and he probably should have sat back a little bit more if they wanted to have more of a chance of beating Manchester City.